This is Gemara Menachos, Daf Ayin Hey, and we're holding on Ayin Dalet Amid Beis. We pick it up from a Mishnah at the bottom of the Amid, Mishnah discussing the oil addition to the Karban Mincha as we continuously go deeper and deeper into each and every point, prat, and detail. All three of those meant the same thing, of the Karban Mincha. Says the Mishnah, Kol HaMenachos Nasois Bikli. All menachos are made in a kli. To unois, they require shleisha matanai shemen, 3 matanais of oil. Now, just to point out, the girsa of the Mishnah that we're looking at, if you're looking at the same Mishnah that I am, is bikli. If you see Rashi over here, and of course, as you're noticing Rashi, 2 different versions of Rashi, a lot to talk about, but says Rashi, nasais bikli sharis. So, whether it was a different girsa, whether it's explaining what it is, but either way, the detail over here is that the karban mincha is made in a kli shares, in a kli of the Beis Hamikdash, and now it requires, back into the Mishnah, 3 matanais, 3 applications of shemen. Number 1, yitzika, pouring. Number 2, belila, mixing. And number 3, umatan shemen bikli, koidem lasiyasan, putting the oil into the kli before you make it. You can almost envision, frying pancakes or making, something else in a frying pan, as we'll see, or a deep pan. Either way, so you're going to put in the oil into the flour, you're going to mix it into the flour, then you're going to put oil into the kli before you put the ingredients into the kli. Says the Mishnah, you mix the oil once they're made into the loaves. No, you mix in the oil while it's still flour. And finally, the Mishnah continues, that when it comes to chalois that are made in an oven, there's 2 types. Chalois tu'nois belila. Chalois require mixing with oil. Urikikin, and the rikikin, which are the more wafer type of menachos, mishicha, smearing with oil. Ketzad ma'ishchin, how do you do that? Kimin ki, you shape it like the shape of a ki, or a chi in English. And this is a Greek letter, exactly what it is, similar to the letter tes. Rashi over here points out is kimin chi. Kimin chi v'ashar nachon l'kohanim, and the rest of the oil is eaten by the kohanim. So says the Gemara, let's start the first part of the Mishnah, which was what? Which was that the Menachos require asiyasan bikli, the making of the mincha is in the kli. Says the Mishnah, lemute mai, what does it come to exclude? Amara papa lemute minchas ma'afe. It excludes the mincha that is baked. So the Mishnah is teaching us that it has to go into a kli. Meaning, let's say better. All menachos that go in a kli, now we should put the whole statement together. I'm sorry, it wasn't clear. It's not all menachos that go in a kli, because the Mishnah is saying it's me'ute, the Gemara says me'ute, it's excluding the mincha that doesn't go in the kli. So, Rabbi, does he yes go in the kli, does not go in the kli? So the answer is, they do not all go in a kli. There are menachos that all go in a kli. Says the Mishnah, all menachos that go in a kli, those menachos that we're talking about, they have a din of matanois shemen, placing the oil 3 times. Tanarabanan, says the Gemara, minchas marcheshes karbanechas shemen te'oseh. Now we're going to get the mikar for what we're talking about, the mikar for the 3 times of matnas shemen. Says the Mishnah, v'minchas marcheshes karbanecha soiles b'shemen. Malami, this teaches us sheteuna matan shemen bekli, that it requires putting oil in a kli before the flour is added. Karbanecha continues the brisa. It says the word karbanecha 2 times. The gzeir shava, which teaches us ma kan, as we turn over to Ayin Hey Amid Aleph, says the Gemara, Makan matan shemen bikli avla'alon. Matan shemen bikli michas machavas michas marcheshes. Just like one has to go bikli, so to the other. Continues the Gemara Uma, and just like lahalon yitziko belila, just like regarding the michas machavas, there's pouring, there's mixing. Afkan yitziko belila, so too at the michas marcheshes is pouring and mixing. And now we have the second application of oil to these menachos. Chalois boil on divri Rebbe. You mix the oil after ready meat into loaves. Rebbe held while it is flour. Says the Gemara on the fourth line of Ayin Amid Aleph Tanu Rabbanon teaches the Brisa soiles belula. Flour mixed with oil. Melami, this teaches us shenivleles soiles, that has to be mixed while it is flour, which of course, that was the shita of the Chachamim, whereas Rebbe says, no, chalois boilon, shenemar, how do I know? Chalois belulois. Amrulai, the Chachamim say to Rebbe, v'alo lachmei taida, with regarding the lachmei taida, nemar bahen chalois. And the lachmei taida, it is impossible to mix them while they are loaves, but rather ella soiles only when it is flour. Why that's true, the Gemara will get to in a moment. But says the Gemara, say the Chacham to Rebbe, we have a precedent that as much as it says chalois blulois, it can't mean like you Rebbe just said. So therefore, say the Chacham must be that it's done while it is flour. So what should you do? But you put the kli into the oil into the kli before the mincha. You put the flour into the kli. You put more oil onto it, and you mix it, and you knead it, and you bake it. And you break it into pieces, and then you put oil on it, and then you take the kimitza. That's a chum of the lachmi taida. Rabbi Omer, no. Rabbi sticks to his guns. Chalois bailan, shemar chalois balulos, b'shemen. Keitzer oisa. Noisy shem mikli kodim nasiyasa. And then nicely you put in the flour of and you need it. You bake it up, and you break it into pieces. And put more oil on it, and now. And you mix it again. So is the extra application of oil, which is according to Rebbe, the application of oil in the loaf form once it is baked. And then you do more oil and a kemitza. Says the Gemara, 1 second. The Rabbanan, the Rebbe, Maihi. The Rabbanan, what was their taina to Rebbe? The taina of the Rabbanan to Rebbe was it's Efsher. It's impossible. Frak to Gemara, what does that mean? Amar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, Ravi Shemen. Says Rav Shmuel, I'll explain it to you. That by the Taida, there's only a Ravius of Shemen for the entire Lachmei Taida, which is Esrim Lechamim, 20 breads. Heich Mischaleka the Kamachales. So that's why the Chachamim held it was impossible. And that's the Machlokes Chacham and Rabbi when the flour is added. Continues the Gemara about 15 lines down, the two dots, quoting the next segment of the Mishnah, Cholos Tunis Belila, Rikikim Mishicha. Tanu Rabbanan, says the Gemara. Again, what's the Makar? Chalos Belulois Veloi Rikikin Belulin. By chalos is mixed with oil, but not rikikin. Shiachla, we think v'lo denu tekal v'chaymer. Oma chalos she'enan tunis mishicha. Yet, tunis belila. Rikikin she'tunis mishicha and odin she'tunis belila. Tamulaymer chalos belulois. V'lo rikikin belulin. Continues the Brisa, rikikin mishuchen. The rikikin are smeared with oil. V'lo chalos mishuches. But the chalos are not. Now it's the reversed. Shiachla, everything v'lo Mar rikikin she'enan tunis belila. Tuna mishicha, chalos she'tunis belila, odin she'tunis mishicha. Tamulaymer rikikin mishuchen. And now number 3. Says the Gemara. So what is this? My Talmud, what is this limud? How does the Brisa know that when it says belulois b'shemen, it excludes the rikikin. When it says mishuchim b'shemen, it excludes the chalois. Amar Rava says Rav loy lishtamit v'lichtaif. Could it not have said one pasuk chalois mishuchais or rikikin belulin? Since there is no such pasuk, therefore each part of the pasuk comes to exclude the other one, and that's how the limit of the Gemara is, that the chalois are belulis b'shemen, and the rikikin are meshucha b'shemen, but neither one is done to the other. And now, 10 lines from the Mishnah, we quote, Keter moishchem kimin chi v'ashar nechal, my kimin chi, says the Gemara, Amar Avkana kimin chi yevani, a Greek chi, a Greek ki. Tana Rabban min chaba mechatzel v'chalois. And now we conclude the first half of today's shir. That says the Braisa, what would you do if you're bringing a mincha that is part chalois, part rikikin? How would that work? And this really brings us all the way back to a sheet of Rav Shimon from many, many daf ago, daf samach gimel and beis. Rav Shimon espoused this ideology that you could bring chatzi chalois, a chatzi rikikin. So the question is, what do you do with the oil? So says the Gemara, maybe like shemen, the chaytzeo. You bring a lug of oil and you split it up. Half and half. A chalis boil and the chalis is mixed in. Rikikin moishel and shmired. Or moishech has a raki kabinei kula. By the rikikin you smear it on the entire thing. Vashar Hashem and machziroi lechalos, and the rest of the oil goes back to the chalos. Rav Shimon Yehuda, Rav Shimon Omer moishchin kiminchi. Vashar Hashem and nechol lekoyanim. Tanya Yidach, one more brisa. Rikikin abam b'fnei atzman. What do you do by the rikikin? They brought by themselves. Maybe like shemen moishch v'chayzer moishchin. You do mishicha twice. Achiyech lekol hashemen, not twice, as many times till all the oil is finished. Look, shemen Yehuda. I remember shemen moishchin kiminchi. Shar shemen echal lakoy anim. We continue with the next Mishnah, which is continuing the types of Menachos, and says the Mishnah, as we just saw in the first part of today's shir, that part of the mincha was after it was baked, it was broken into pieces, more oil was added, etc. So says the Mishnah, Kol ha-menachos and b'kli to unais psicha. All mincha that is made in a kli, made in a kli sharis, as we saw in the previous Mishnah, says this Mishnah has to be to unais psicha, requires to be broken into pieces. Says the Gemara, Lemute mai. What is this coming to exclude? That those are not broken into pieces, and those are not made in kli sharis. Why? Because they're just baked in the oven. Tana Rabbanan, let's bring a makar. Break it into pieces. It is a mincha, pasuk and vikra base. The rabbi is called Menachos the psisa. Maybe even the shtei lechem lechem upon him needs to be broken up. Tamalemer oisa it. The attacked on, you pour oil into it. Shemen mincha. The rabbis call hamenachos liyitzika. This includes all menachos into the requirement of yitzika of pouring. Yachla, I would think shanimar ba'af menachos ma'afa. Maybe I should include even menachos that are baked in an oven. Talmud loymar oleho shemen. Pour oil onto it. Oitzi, this comes to exclude as a chalois. V'loitzi is a rekikin. Talmud loymar he. My Talmud says the Gemara, how do we see this? How do we see that it comes to exclude the mincha that's baked in the oven? Loitzi minchas ema. My Talmud, ema loitzi minchas kahanim. Maybe it just comes to exclude the minchas kohanim. As we turn over to Ayin Hey Amud Beis, says the Gemara, no, Amar Rava. And with this we conclude part B of today's shir. Says Rava, Dava Ezeu Davar Shnei Miutin Havyomer Zeh Minchas Ma'afa. There are two exclusions. That's how we know this is the Minchas Ma'afa, which as well has two different ways it's brought, Chalas and Rikik, and therefore it requires two different exclusions. Says the Mishnah. Okay, so what did we just learn? We just learned the part of the Mincha process is Petita, is breaking it into pieces. Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, how is that done? As if you're keeping track, we're seeing in classical sequential form as we dive deeper and deeper into the process. Says the Mishnah, Minchas Yisrael. The mincha of a Yisrael, what this means is, a Yid, a Yisrael, brings in a dove of mincha. What do? Koifel echad l'shnayim. You fold one loaf into two. L'shnayim la'arba, 2 into 4. And then umavdil, you separate the 4 pieces. That's if it's a Yisrael. Minchas kohanim, kovelech l'shnayim, l'shnayim la'arba, v'ino mavdil. Minchas kohen Mashiach, lo yahya mekabla, they were not folded at all. Rabbi Shimon Omer says, Rabbi Shimon, no. Minchas kohanim, minchas kohen Mashiach, ein bahem petita. They have no petita. They're not broken into pieces. Why? Mimnei she'ein bahem kemitza, because there is no din of kemitza. V'chol she'ein bahem kemitza, ein bahem petita. Kulan poitzam bekizayis, and all of them are broken into pieces the size of a kizayis. So says the Gemara, let's take the Mishnah piece by piece. First part of the Mishnah was what? That a Yisrael's mincha is folded and folded, broken into 4 pieces. Where do we know that in the Torah? Says the Gemara, Tanarabana Batoit. The pasuk says break. Yachal, I would think, how do you break something? L'shnayim, into 2 pieces. Tamlamar pitim, ipitim yachal yes, and a pirurim has to be small pieces. Tamlaimar oisa. Oisa lebetitim, lebetita lebetitim. Ha ketzad. Mincha Yisrael kavenach l'shnayim m'shem la'arba. Umavd. Minchas kanim koyin Mashiach. Ayam makabla v'chulu. I vonanted aloy makabla. Our Mishnah taught us that in Minchas koyin Mashiach they would not break into pieces. Amarabba ina makabla la'arba. Oh, excuse me. Aval makabla shnayim would have be folded and broken into 2. Now we conclude today's shir with the final part of the Mishnah, which was Shitas Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon Aimer, we're smacking the Lamed of Ein Ham and Beis. Minchas Kahanim, Minchas Kohen Mashiach, Ein B'Hem Betita, Rav Yosef, Hay Chavitza, this be Peruin Kizayis, Menvarchen Alei, HaMoitzi Lechem Min Haaretz. Says the Gemara, what's our discussion? Discussion is taking bread and breaking it into pieces. So says the Gemara, let's go to another case of bread broken into pieces, which is going to be the bracha. And then the Mishnah is going to circle around as a raya. So says the Gemara, says Rav Yosef, the chavitza, which is a cooked dish, says Rashi, with pieces of bread, mevarchin hamoitz lechem min haaretz. If the pieces of the cooked bread are not a kizayis, then mevarchin alei b'rei minim mizaynis. Omer Rav Yosef, so where do I know this din of the bracha on this cooked dish of bread pieces? So when he's standing and bringing Menachos to Yerushalayim, Omer Baruch Shechianu v'kimanu. Nalan Nachlan, he takes the pieces of Menachos to eat it, then mevarech. Utanan. So we see that the carbon mincha is a hamaitzi after Shechianu. Utanan, and then we have another Mishnah, which is our Mishnah. Here's the raya. So what do we see? We see if you're eating kizayis sized bread, you're going to make a hamaitzi. Amalei Abaya, frak Abaya, 1 second. That you break them into pieces until they return to their flour. Say it, until Mavarach, you can tell me it's not a Maitzi. Maybe you're going to help me out. We learned to the Brisa, like them Kulan, Kizayis, Achlan. But we learned, not that way. We learned that if you gathered up all the bits of the bread, and now it's the size of a Kizayis afterwards, and you eat it, then, Em Chametzu, Einish Karis. So we see that even though the pieces themselves are not a kizayis, it's seemingly a maitzi. Answers the Gemara, is that you took all the little bits and you formed them into a single dough. Now they are actually the size of a kizayis. Frak the Gemara, 1 second. If that is true, not achlan, it's 1 piece. Says the Gemara, very important aside. If you have a large piece of bread, even if afterwards it's broken into teeny little pieces, it still retains its hamaitzi. May have a lot of shisham rafilu ruin shedim kizayis amarav vudika turisa dinama lei. But Avad says turisa dinama says of the more massive sugyas in Hilchos Brachas, exactly how we reconcile all these different details. But one thing is for sure, If you start off with a loaf of bread, and then that loaf of bread goes and it's broken up subsequently, the loaf of bread still is called a loaf of bread. This, of course, is where croutons often rear their, not ugly head, beautiful head. You just have to know they're hamaitzi often when the croutons were made from bagels, originally, even if right now they're very small, still be hamaitzi. And we're going to pick it up from the next Mishnah on the next daf. Pesiyata Dishmai.